Once upon a time in the village of Umoy, there was a woman so beautiful that men forgot their own names when they saw her. Her name was Amaka. Her skin was smooth like fresh palm oil, her eyes sparkled like morning dew, and her smile, oh, her smile could melt the heart of even the angriest man. Men whispered about her beauty, women envied her charm. Whenever she walked through the market, traders forgot their prices, men dropped whatever they were holding, and even the birds in the trees seemed to pause and watch. One old woman sighed and shook her head. "This kind of beauty is dangerous," she murmured. But Amaka was not just beautiful, she was wise. She knew the power she had over men and how to keep them at a distance. "No touching before marriage," she always said. Every man Amaka met, she insisted that there would be no intimacy before marriage. Men saw this as a sign of dignity. They respected her and praised her for her virtue. But Amaka knew the truth. This was not about dignity, it was about her secret. A secret she had carried all her life. If a man ever touched her, if a man ever saw what was between her thighs, he would never be the same again. So she smiled, she laughed, she let them admire her from afar, but she never let any man too close. And that was how she lived until Ferin, a handsome young man, came into her life. Ferin was a good man, a man with a heart as pure as fresh palm wine. He was kind, hardworking, and he loved Amaka like no man had ever loved before. From the first time he saw her at the village stream, he was lost. His heart beat fast, his legs felt weak. "This one," he told himself, "this is the woman I will marry." And so he chased after her. He bought her gifts, fine wrappers, sweet palm wine, and fresh bush meat. He sang her praises. He whispered sweet words. "Amaka, you are the light of my world." "And Adesawa?" She smiled, she laughed, but she did not let him get too close. "No touching before marriage," she reminded him as she did all men. Ferin did not mind. "You are a good woman," he said, his heart swelling with love. "I will wait." 4 months they courted. The village watched, the village gossiped. "Finally, our Amaka will marry." And then, one bright afternoon, Ferin went to her father's house with his people. He knelt before her and said, "Marry me, Amaka. Be the mother of my children." Amaka smiled. She liked Ferin. He was gentle and he made her laugh. But deep inside, fear gripped her heart. Still, she said, "Yes, I will marry you." The village rejoiced. Drummers played, women danced, children ran around shouting her name. "Amaka the beautiful is getting married," they sang. The wedding was grand. Even the oldest men in the village said they had never seen such a feast. But the real night had not yet come. When the celebration ended and the last candle burned low, Amaka and Ferin were alone. The room was quiet, only the sound of crickets outside. Ferin held her hands and whispered, "My love, don't be afraid. You are mine now." Amaka's heart pounded. She knew this moment would come. Her hands trembled as she stepped back. "Ferin, maybe we should sleep first." "We are tired," she said, her voice shaking. Ferin laughed. "Sleep? My wife, don't be shy. I have waited for this night. I will love you gently." Amaka swallowed hard. She knew there was no escape. Hesitant and shaking, she finally pulled off her clothes. The moment Ferin set his eyes on what lay between her thighs, he let out a loud scream. Then, in the blink of an eye, he went blind. "Ah, my eyes! My eyes!" Ferin's voice rang through the night. He clutched his face and staggered back. Amaka froze. "What is it? What is wrong?" she cried. But Ferin could not hear her. His world had turned black. Just like that, his eyes had gone blind. His screams woke the entire village. People ran into the house. Elders, women, even the children. "What happened? What is wrong with him?" they asked. But Ferin only wailed. He pointed at Amaka, shaking, his mouth open in horror, but he could not see her anymore. The elders whispered among themselves. The villagers looked at Amaka with suspicion, but nobody could explain what had happened. The next morning, Amaka packed her things and left. She did not cry, she did not explain, she just left Ferin behind, his eyes forever dark, his future forever changed. Her secret was still safe, but fate was not done with her yet. Not long after Folerin's mysterious blindness, whispers about Amaka filled the village like harmattan dust. Some said she was cursed, others said Folrin had fallen sick from an unknown disease. But no one knew the truth, and Amaka carried on with her life as if nothing had happened. Then a few months later, Amaka met another man. His name was Obena. Obena was not like Folrin. He was richer, stronger, and more powerful. His father was a great chief, and his mother came from a long line of wealthy traders. Obena himself had businesses in many towns. He had horses, farms, and enough gold to make even the king jealous. When he first saw Amaka, his heart skipped a beat. "Who is that woman?" he asked his friend at the market. "That is Amaka," the friend replied, "the most beautiful woman in Umoy. But be careful, my brother, there is a mystery about her." Obena laughed. "What mystery? A woman this beautiful cannot be dangerous. I will marry her." And so Obena began to chase Amaka, a hunter after a deer. He sent gifts to her house, cloths from faraway lands, beads that sparkled like the stars, and bags of rice big enough to feed a whole family for a year. But Amaka, as always, smiled sweetly and said, "No touching before marriage." Obena loved this about her. A woman of virtue, a woman who respects herself. This is the kind of wife I need. Before long he asked for her hand in marriage. The wedding was grander than Folerin's. Drummers played until their hands ached. Dancers moved their bodies until sweat covered their skin. People came from far and wide to witness the marriage of Obena the rich and Amaka the beautiful. Even the king sent his messengers with gifts. But when the sun went down and the guests went home, the real night began. Obena and Amaka sat in their new home, a big house with high. The whole village gathered for the wedding. It was bigger than any wedding before it. Goats were slaughtered, palm wine flowed like river water, and musicians played until their fingers bled. "This time it will be different," the villagers whispered. "Obena is not like the others." But when the sun went down and the last drumbeat faded, the real night began, the wedding night. Obena and Amaka stood inside the finest hotel in town. The bed was covered in white sheets, the air smelled of fresh flowers, and the candles flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. Obena smiled, ready for the night. He held Amaka's hands. "My love, you are now my wife. Tonight, nothing will come between us." Amaka's heart pounded. Her hands turned cold. Her legs felt weak. She had seen this before, the same night, the same moment, the same fear. She tried to move away, but Obena only laughed. "Don't be shy, my wife. You belong to me now." Amaka took a deep breath. No escape. Slowly and hesitantly, she removed her wedding attire. Already high in anticipation, Obena reached for her. But as he did, he noticed something unusual. Confused, he turned on the main lights. And the moment he saw what lay before him, he let out a loud, terrified scream. His voice echoed through the entire hotel. His face twisted in shock. His legs wobbled and he stumbled back, knocking over a wooden chair. His heart pounded like a war drum. Then, a knock at the door. "Obena. What is happening?" More knocks. Then the door burst open. Obena's family, his friends, his servants, they all rushed in. The villagers flooded the room. And for the first time, Amaka's secret was no longer hers alone. The bitter truth was revealed. The long-kept mystery was exposed to the whole world. Amaka stood frozen in shame. People around her began to shout. "She is a witch. A bad omen. Who knows? Maybe she wanted to harm Obena." The words were too harsh to bear. Amaka began to tremble. Another voice rang out. "We don't want to hear anything from you, deceiver. Who sent you?" Amaka shook with fear and shame, trying to speak. Obena, still gasping for breath, suddenly coughed. His face turned pale. Then, within moments, he collapsed. His body convulsed violently. Then, nothing. Silence. The entire village stood in shock. The man who had been celebrating his wedding just hours ago was now lifeless. Amaka lay on the cold floor, her hands shaking, her face wet with tears. The crowd roared above her. Their voices were sharp like knives. She deceived Obena? She caused this. She must have used charms to trap him. Amaka covered her ears. The voices were too loud. The words were too heavy. She wanted to scream, to disappear, to wake up from this nightmare. But she couldn't. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She lifted her head, her lips trembling, her voice weak. "Please, let me speak. We don't want to hear anything from you, evil woman," someone shouted. Amaka shut her eyes, took a deep breath, and then she spoke. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice cracking. The room fell silent. I was born this way. I never knew. I swear I never knew. The villagers stared. Their eyes were filled with doubt and anger. But Amaka continued. I was just 5 years old when my mother died, she whispered. The crowd murmured. Then, the truth began to unfold. Many years ago, before Amaka knew the meaning of pain, before she learned how to smile to hide her sorrow, she was just a little girl. Baby. Her father was a rich man with 6 wives. His house was full of children, but only one daughter, Amaka. Her mother, Neka, was the youngest wife. She was beautiful and kind. But the other wives resented her. Not because she was the favorite. Not because she was younger. They resented her because she gave birth to a girl. In the household, boys were everything. Boys carried the family name. Boys inherited the land. Boys were celebrated. But a girl? A girl was nothing. Amaka's 5 stepmothers looked at her with jealousy and resentment.